inspiration, especially it seems like fallen heroes, fallen like soldiers almost. What were some of the inspirational designs that you guys took?
These are done by Justin Sweet and Vance Kovacs, and this is actually one of my more favorite characters in the game. I really love what they did. Again, inspiration came from Cory. I think again, kind of playing against type, he had the idea about the harness as the wings, not going with the natural
Oh yeah,
set of wings.
so that it's more like a plane captain getting their wings. Like it
Yeah,
was a sort of a graduation. Like you become the shield maiden, the strong warrior, and what you get out of that is the physical wings as kind of like your mark of being a Valkyrie.
yeah, kind of almost. Yeah, I think one time we were talking about maybe like Odin gifted it to him, or it was very special for them to get it, and
It's a little like the blades,
yeah,
right? So Odin gives it to him, and it feels like a gift, but honestly, it's more of a sign of servitude.
yeah. No, Vance and Justin did these great things where they're almost wearing these death masks, and within those we kind of tried to theme each of them after a different animal, so each one had their own unique design. And I think what came from the wings and the harness also to complement this was a unique gameplay. And what we do with the gameplay is, one, they've got the wings to attack, which is really unique in our character cast, but secondly, where Kratos has the Bifrost and is able to kind of go through realms a little bit, he's kind of learning that magic where these Valkyries have a mastery of it. So even when you attack them, they can kind of almost pull weapons out of different realms. So you may not see them with a sai or a blade, but they'll have it right there. Like their attacks can switch really fast, which is super unique. And
Yeah, even that we started add a lot of the Bifrost energy and how things act in the universe and pulling stuff from different realms. So all the effects and all that stuff kind of plays up on the same vibe. And the same
Those
thing with
helmets
the
were kind
wings.
of a breakthrough moment.
yeah,
Like the first one that was done, and we were like, "Oh my gosh, that's cool!" And starting to theme them after kind of the cardinal animal of each of the Valkyries. I was like, "Oh, that to me was like that awakening moment of like, oh, I can really see how these will work," because all the drawings were really cool. But it's hard to make a Valkyrie that feels like our own
yeah.
because they're so widely understood, and kind of the tenets of what a Valkyrie is uh, are hard to take away. You can't really strip those things away, so you end up having a difficult time distinguishing yourself, but I think we did a pretty good job of that.
That's one thing I like about the mask too, is it takes away the emotion in the face. That's why, like, again, this was like frightening versus horror. That's why sharks are scary to me. You can never tell what they're thinking. It's
Because they
just
wear
like,
masks?
yes, Valkyrie masks, and that's my character concept. Mine.
You're like, that's the I'm gonna pitch that game next, sharks that wear masks.
That character was also cut the shark with the mask, but next game.
It's interesting too because, as you find out when you play through the game, you understand the connection of Odin to the Valkyrie, and part of those helmets, while they are ornate and they kind of disguise, they also sort of dehumanize, if you
Yep.
will. They take away who the person is underneath, which is kind of, very beneficial for Odin. That's something Odin would want, is to turn them into kind of his soldiers.
Any emotions, characteristics that you feel successfully translated in your artwork here?
This was another one kind of take on a classic Norse creature, the trolls. We knew early on we kind of wanted to do like variations, like we have a fire and an ice, a stone troll, and kind of trying to reflect that in this race. One thing I did like again is giving the layers to the character. So even in the first E3 trailer in 2016, he's coming at Kratos, and you can even hear him speaking. So you can tell they've got their background of their own languages, and so that even we don't understand, but it kind of adds to the character that way. Um, One thing we did is we imagined like in this world there'd be these kind of like monolithic structures that have power, and that's actually what the trolls are using as their weapons. So they've kind of picked those up in the world, so that kind of boosts their kind of natural elemental abilities and is like a core of how they
It was a
attack.
very unfortunate gameplay loss. There were some really cool ideas around those markers that they would be present in the world and you would use them. And then if you saw one and it was still sort of there, solid, and no troll had appeared, like, oh, you're like, okay. And then you see another one, you sort of get comfortable, and all of a sudden a troll appears and it snaps it off
Yeah.
and uses it against you. I thought that was kind of neat. And we ended up not really being able to keep it in the scope of the game. But the using it as a weapon still, I think, made it unique for this character.
Well, I think you can even see little hints of that, because as you look at these pillars that they have, the offerings that we imagine people would put at them before they were picked up are still on there, and it's actually what the trolls used to hold them.
Yeah.
Even when you find them in the game, you can see that their reaction's a little like almost like a religion to the totem. So you see them praying to them, and that stuff always helps bring into the character. Also in the design, a lot of the stuff that when we can see them using on his shoulders, so you see energy almost taking over some of his skin, and the reaction to the weapon also on their body. I think it's something that we played on a lot on their designs. And you brought up them being more intelligent, and even on the costuming for these guys, we kind of went a little over on the handmade stuff as they would make stuff for them and try to sell the scale with that stuff.
And each one was kind of like their own little hoarders, right? Like someone collects stones, others.
Oh yeah, and like skulls and stuff like that.
Yeah, each one had their own thing that they kind of hoarded.
I like that fact that like trolls have their own culture,
Yeah.
and that each sort of, I guess, race of trolls, the stone trolls, the ice trolls, and the fire trolls, like they truly had like villages. They had sort of a structured government. They had an alliance with the Aesir gods and sort of a peace with the Vanir gods. And then they were kind of screwed over by everybody, and they ended up wandering the world sort of stateless, right? That the last few that remained before they got double crossed by the gods, like kind of wandered around in this sort of angry Ronin state.
Or the discussions about how you guys came to the final designs of the dragons.
Yeah, this was another early design. I think we knew we wanted dragons. It was one thing we showed in the first E3 trailer. Here are some sketches by Steven, some pieces by Justin Sweet. And the idea was that this dragon lived in the mountains, so we were kind of pulling a lot from that. It's thinking like his skin is paler now that he hasn't, or she hasn't been outside, and the idea that it's almost like a double mouth and it can kind of inhale, and maybe it uses that for burrowing in the mountain, as well as being like a cool attack in the game. So we try to also make sure that the designs work with what we need for the gameplay mechanics.
Even the cave that you mentioned, that him living inside the cave, the wings was part of it. That like since he grew up in there, he kind of didn't develop the wings like the other dragons.
Yeah, just the way you look at real life, how certain animals start to kind of lose limbs and things that they aren't using and stuff, and the pigmentation kind of.
This basically proved that
disappears.
it's really fucking hard to make a dragon that doesn't just look like every other dragon.
Yeah.
This took forever, and every time we were looking at it going like, okay, but it pretty much looks like you could just step off the pages of a Skyrim art book, right? And we, love that game. It's great, but we should make something that feels unique to our world. And that's super hard with dragons, because so many dragons have been drawn over the years.
Well, that's why I said, like, making that a design looks real isn't the metric for success here. I think that we've been in a ton of meeting courts too, where you've been like, this looks great, but we need to still push it.
Right.
And that's like a blessing, but it also is hard work.
Focusing on the weapons, just overall, like what were some of kind of the core values or foundations that you guys were starting with in building these weapons?
Well, for me, it was that the blades are such a part of Kratos, just like the character. So making this new weapon, the axe, was a big deal. Trying to make something that could kind of carry that same weight. And at the first E3, I remember being at E3 with the team, and people responded really well to it, and that was kind of like a sigh of relief. I think it has some nice things. Again, this is one of the things we tried to bring the Norse elements. I think Yefim did a first pass where he had like a skill tree across the axe. So you bring these elements, and then as it progresses, we kind of really kind of push the visual drama on it to really kind of make it stand out. And I love at this studio that they're willing to let us explore things that are small, as like an axe design or an arrow design, even something on the arrows, like how do we make this feel Norse? Maybe it's like braided down the stem or something. And I think it's an example of strong concept design. If you can hold something up and say, hey, this works perfectly in God of War, but if you take it out, it doesn't work, because all the things that we're pulling from are from the story and the world.
Yeah, and then axe itself was a big challenge, just for the gameplay wise as well, like being able to customize it and change it and swap parts and all that. That was a big challenge as well, and make that in a way that it works with the design, because it was. We also, like we mentioned with Kratos in the trails, like for the axe, we also had narrative behind it. There was a lot of cool little things that we could add on, like the ice trolls influences. And if you look at the handle of the like if the head of the axe, it has a lot of Istral influences in design on the head of the axe, and that makes it that much more special instead of just doing like some Norse patterns. I think every time we try to bring the narrative into the designs, I think it helps solidify the idea a lot.
Yeah, 'cause that's a part I think it's easy in games not to really get that narrative part. You know, it's easy to say, hey, we just need a brawler or like a ranged guy. And part of the history of the axe that Cory had was that Istral, but it also had belonged to the mother. So you can see in the last upgrade of the axe, it almost has a falcon look to the tip of the blade, and then the bottom pommel of it as well. Like that's all inspired from the narrative stuff that Cory and the team gave us.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't go too heavily into
Mm-mm.
a lot of that stuff, but it's nice to have these influences there to know that everything has a sort of grounded purpose within the world. Like it's all being built, from very sort of specific histories as opposed to kind of just the random. I think you could really tell when you look at some games where it's just like everybody randomly throwing a bunch of stuff together in a pot. Whereas something I think throughout all of God of War's history, you can kind of look at all of the art and really see that central concept that kind of breathes or sort of tendrils out to all these different aspects, and all of them feel like they're part of the same world as opposed to the sort of randomized feel.
And I think audience these days are really smart. Like you said, they're dissecting this stuff and really picking up. And I think that layering, they can really kind of tell.
Yes.
And
It's funny, this is like the weapons page, and we got Kratos' hands on here. He's like Chuck Norris, man. His
Those are the
fucking
biggest
hands are a
weapons on
weapon, right? Or is this is that to show off the different scars he's got from the chains? Is that what the drawings were meant for?
Yeah, kind of. Obviously, the history, we don't have the blades, but we still want to
Right.
recall that they're still there. That's part of who he was.
Yeah.
Those scars will never go away. And then I think a big narrative thing too was he was trying to kind of keep that past.
But they
from
also
his
don't
son.
stop bleeding.
Yeah.
Like since he left Greece, they were sort of the wounds that never healed, right? And then throughout the game, he's kind of, like you said, hiding it, trying to sort of pretend his history didn't exist. But that never works out well for people.
Yeah, he can't get away, even though he's trying. It's still kind of part of him.
Everybody, thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you to Dark Horse. Thank you to our VizDev team. And thank you guys for listening to this whole commentary.
Thank you to our entire art team.
And our art team.
Yeah,
Thank you to our
it was a
entire
group effort.
art team. And
in production for working with us.
Yes,
And allowing us to endlessly
putting up with the
perfect. Yeah.
craziness. Honestly, it's thank you to every single person on this team and every significant other who has suffered through the insane schedule that we've had throughout all of this. We love you all, and we thank you. Hopefully, it shall be worth it.